Math 10 CP. It's our last lesson of Unit 2, and then we're going to have some assignments and quizzes and tests. You made it through Unit 2. You've done all your multiplying. You've done all your factoring. Life is looking good. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to do our final type of factoring. It's called the grouping method. Before this, we learned about some multiplying, so let's just review multiplying. We got some binomials with binomials here. So to multiply a binomial with a binomial, x times x becomes x squared. X times negative 2 becomes negative 2x. Plus 2 times x becomes plus 2x. And plus 2 times negative 2 becomes negative 4. If you look, we collect some like terms. These two like terms would actually cancel out. Negative 2x plus 2x cancels out, giving me x squared minus 4. Awesome. Number 2. We look at this one. We go x times x to give me x squared. We go x times 1 to become plus 1x. We go 5 times x to become plus 5x. And then we go 5 times 1 to become plus 5. Again, we collect our like terms in the middle. We got x plus 5x, and that becomes x squared plus 6x's plus 5. All right. Our last one over here on the right. We go x times 2x to become 2x squared. We go x times negative 3 to become negative 3x. We go y times 2x to become plus 2xy. And then we go y times negative 3 to become negative 3y. You'll notice that there's no like terms in this question, right? X squared and x are not like terms, and then x and xy are not like terms, and x, y, and y are not like terms. So that is actually donezo for multiplication. Awesome. That was the first half of the unit, was multiplying things together. The second half was factoring. Factoring is unmultiplying, right? So factoring is unmultiplying something. Cool. So if we look at our examples above, how could we unmultiply each thing? So if we look at the first one, this red one is a binomial. Right? That's my answer. After I multiplied, I got a binomial. To factor or unmultiply a binomial, we did something called a difference of squares. So what we would do is we'd realize that we had a subtraction question with things we could square root, so we would just square root everything. The square root of x squared would be x. The square root of 4 would be 2. And then we always wrote out a second binomial, but with a plus sign in the middle. That was called difference of squares. It's how we factored binomials. Our middle one, if we look at this thing is a trinomial. It is 3 terms. The way we factor trinomials is with our diamond method. So the way our diamond method worked is we would take our a value, a is what's in front of your x squared, times it by our c value. Our c value is our last term, so a times c would be 5. We took our middle term, our b term, and we put it on the bottom. And then we would find two numbers that multiplied to be the top and added to be the bottom. So two things that multiply to be 5 and add to be 6 would be 5 and 1. And then we would go 2 sets of brackets. The first thing is both sets of brackets is x and x, because I know those will multiply to become x squared. And then the side of that little diamond method, those are the second things that we did in each of our brackets. So we factored trinomials by using a diamond method. And you'll notice both of our answers turned into 2 binomials multiplied together. Today, what we're going to do is, what the heck do we do when we get a polynomial? What if we have more than 3 terms? Specifically, what happens if we have 4 terms? Well, our method is going to be something called grouping method. That is how we're going to unmultiply or factor 4-term polynomials. I've written the steps out below, so you have them written down. But we're just going to do a bunch of examples because that's honestly the best way to do it. So we'll do 3 examples together, and I'll let you try 3 on your own. And hopefully by then you're feeling confident that you can do your practice questions. So first thing we do, we look at our question. We notice that there's 4 terms, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 terms means I want to do my grouping method. The first step of grouping method is to split that thing in half. So I like to draw a little dotted line right after the second term, like that. And when I cut it in half, you're going to have 2 sides. Okay, I have the red side and the blue side. 2 sides, side 1, side 2. Awesome. Your second step, you are going to take a greatest common factor out of each half. So if you were to look just at the red side, you want to take a greatest common factor out of just the red side. Well, if I look at just the red side, both of them could divide by x. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take an x out of my first side. And I would be left with x minus 3. Do you see how that works? So I took an x out of my left side, my red side over there. X squared divided by x is x, and 3x divided by x is negative 3. On the right-hand side, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to take a greatest common factor out of that right side. I'm going to divide both sides by y. So I would take out a y, and I would be left with, and I took out a positive y, so I put a plus y, and I'd be left with a 2x minus 3. Oh boy, not good, not good, not good. This 2 shouldn't be here. On your page, there's no 2 there. On mine, there is a 2. So it should just be x minus 3. Like that. Okay, sorry. There was a 2 there on your page. There isn't one on... Sorry, there isn't one on your page, but there was one on mine. Awesome. After you've done that, so you split it in half, then you took a GCF for each half. If you did that properly, you're now going to be able to create 2 binomials. And you'll notice that after you took a greatest common factor out, you had 2 binomials that were the same. If they're not the same, then you didn't do it right. So you'll notice I have an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. That means that x minus 3 is my first binomial in my answer. My second binomial are those things that I greatest common factored out. So in this case, it was x plus y. And those are my 2 binomials multiplied together. So I split it in half. I took a greatest common factor out of each side. The binomials that were the same is my first binomial. The things I took out, my greatest common factors, create my second one. The first couple times you see grouping method, it's usually a little weird, and then you catch on, and then it kind of rolls. So if we look at number 2, we're going to try this one. The first thing I do is I count that there's 4 terms, which tells me I want to do grouping method. Step 1, cut it in half right after the second term. This creates 2 sides. I've got my red side and I've got my blue side. Your second step is to take a greatest common factor out of each side. On my red side, I could take out an x from both terms. That would leave me with y and a plus 5. On my blue side, I could take a 3 out of both terms. And it's a positive 3 I took out, so plus 3. Leaving me with y plus 5. If you did grouping method properly, you'll notice after step 2 that you have 2 binomials that are the same. You have 2 things in brackets that are identical. You're actually going to take those away to turn it into the first binomial that you're multiplying together. If you were to take those 2 things out of the question, you're then left with x and a plus 3. And your answer is y plus 5 times x plus 3. And that is how you could factor a 4-term polynomial. So I took that 4 terms and I turned it into multiplication. Let's do another one. I look at number 3. The first step is to count how many terms you have. I have 4 terms. That means I want to do my grouping method. With my grouping method, I need to take my polynomial and cut it in half right after the second term. This creates 2 sides. I have side 1 over here, the red side, and I have side 2 over here, the blue side. On the red side, I take out a greatest common factor now. I'm going to take out an x squared. When I do that, the x squared is out front, and I'm left with 2y minus 3. On the second side, I look at my things and I realize I could take out a y from both things. It's a positive y I took out, so I'm putting plus y. And then I go in my brackets, I'm left with 2y minus 3. If you did that properly, you should have 2 things in the brackets that are the same. I'm essentially going to take that out of the question. I'm going to greatest common factor it out front, so it becomes my first binomial. My second binomial is what's left over. X squared plus y. And that is my solution. Awesome. There's 3 examples right there on how to do these grouping method problems. I want you to pause the video and try the 3 on the right hand side. Okay, and just try your absolute best. 4 is definitely the trickiest one. So maybe try, 4 is probably the trickiest one. So give it a shot and then unpause, see if you got it right. Pause, try number 5. Unpause, see if you got it right. Pause, do number 6. Unpause, see if you got number 6 right. Cool. Hopefully you paused and tried number 4. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to follow my 3 steps. First step, cut it in half. This creates 2 sides, right? Side 1, side 2. On the red side, I take out a greatest common factor. I can take out 3 from both of those numbers, and a y from both of those letters. So the 3y comes out front, and I'm left with 2y minus 11z. Awesome. Now the reason this is the hardest one, if I look at the blue side, I'm going to have to think ahead a little bit. So on the blue side, I'm going to take out a greatest common factor of 5z, because both sides divide by 5, and both sides divide by z. But I'm going to think ahead a little bit here. If I took out a 5z, I would be left with negative 2y and positive 11z, which is not the same. You'll notice that the symbols are in the wrong spots. So instead of taking out a positive 5z, I'm going to take out a negative 5z. And by taking out a negative 5z, it will change this to be plus 2y, because negative 10 divided by negative 5 is positive 2. And it will change this to be a negative 11z, because positive 55 divided by negative 5 would be negative 11z. And now my symbols do match. And now these two binomials are the same thing. And remember, these two have to be the same thing, or else grouping method didn't work. So I had to take out a negative 5z. That gives me 2y minus 11z as my first binomial. And then my leftovers are 3y minus 5z. And that is my answer. 2y minus 11z times 3y minus 5z. That's by far the hardest one I think we do. Awesome. Try number 5 on your own, then come back and see if you got it right. So to do number 5, step 1, cut it in half. That gives you 2 sides. You need to take a greatest common factor out of each side. Out of the red side, I'm going to take out an x. If I do that, it leaves me with 2 plus y. On the blue side, I'm going to take out a y squared. When I take out that positive y squared, it leaves me with 2x plus y. You'll notice that these two things are the same. That is my first binomial in my multiplication. My leftovers, x plus y squared, is my second binomial. Boom. Last one, number 6. First job, split in half. Second job, factor your 2 sides. This one I'm going to divide by 10x. The second side I'm going to divide by 7. That gives me 10x out front, x minus 3 left over. On the blue side, I take out a positive 7, and I'm left with x squared minus 7, minus 3. Sorry, this is an x squared over here. These two binomials are the same thing. My leftovers become my second thing, or my second binomial. And that is my factored polynomial. Wonderful. We are now done Unit 2. Things that are super important going forward that you want to get good at. The factoring. I mean, if you can factor, it's going to make your life a lot easier in Math 10C and a lot easier in Math 20-1 or 20-2, depending which route you go. So those skills of factoring binomials, trinomials, harder trinomials, and 4-term polynomials, those are going to be very important skills to master. Make sure you pop into the class, ask questions, do your practice sheet. Remember, there's an answer key. Do your practice. It's how you're going to get good. This week, we have our quiz coming up on Wednesday and our unit test coming up on Friday. And then it is Christmas break. Take care of yourselves. I hope to hear from you very soon.